Okay, so we're getting ready. Well, that was really exciting. It's fun to hear that we're already late with digital art, so that's good from the last panel. But no, we're just on time. Our next panel is digital art in the new age of impact. We have Leila here who's going to introduce, but we're really excited to welcome you guys. Thanks.
Thank you very much. No, actually, I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves. Just wanted to say thank you, Diane, and thank you, George. All of us here on stage, of course, and so many of you in the audience care about sort of digital art for impact. But George and Diane are sort of big proponents, and thank you for putting this panel together. So Alex, I'm going to start with you because you and I didn't catch up until like very, very late this morning. So tell us, we all know you as head of arts for Trilitech, and we all know what an amazing job you're doing. But I've known you as sort of a builder in this space for a long time. Tell us a little bit about the journey and how and why philanthropy was so important to you all along.
One, two. Thank you so much, Leila. Thanks for having me here today. We've worked with some of you on some fundraising as well. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Aleksandra Art. I'm the head of art at Trilitech and Tezos ecosystem. And for those of you that do, mostly know me for arts programming and all the art-related things. So just to contextualize my background in the context of art for good and sort of like having missions when building corporate collections, I graduated in politics and international relations. And during that period of time, naturally, I always had interest in art, and I was looking for ways, how do I tie politics and art? And it wasn't until we organized sort of like a mission journey to Rio de Janeiro, and we've spent a month working with children and a local charity in the favela of Cidade de Deus, City of God. And we had a chance to connect to sort of like the local organizers and really go to the absolute ground level, and like children who have scars on their bellies because of gang wars. Like, we wouldn't stay in the favela, we had to stay somewhere else. But I've spent a very long time. And at the same time, during that trip, we also visited like Petrobras and like these big organizations. And I think during that period of time, I really learned how drastic the world can be, and how different the way we talk about charity and mission statements, and when you actually see the reality of things, how it can make an impact. So that influenced me to write my dissertation about the power of photography at influencing social change, because I had to write about something political, but photography was a way to tune in art. And I looked at propaganda and the way the Vietnam War was being communicated across sort of like the different world powers, you could say. And continuing from that, naturally, I started my first job. I was working in consulting. So actually it was very dry because I had to save money to later pay for my master's degree. But the consulting was leadership consulting. So it's not your typical sort of like Excel sheets. It's more about diving not into the operations, but more on the people. So it was a boutique consultancy in Chicago where it was 4 people. I worked remotely, and the founder was advising leaders of different organizations. So HubSpot, Starbucks, working with very incredible people on how do you build teams that maximize impact, but also what is your vision long term. So one of the experiences I had was working with the president of Dartmouth University, who later on went to be the president of World Bank, or president of the North Carolina University. And all of these experiences helped me see things not on the ground level as I had before, but also sort of like on the bigger level. So I'm going to just quickly fast forward to impact and projects, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but it did result into, when I later shifted to working in the art world, into working on projects that also help both with fundraising, but also pushing forward narratives that are typically ignored.
And I think we're seeing more and more of that, right? So Solimán, I'm going to go to you next, because I wanted to ask you, and we've spoken a couple of times this week, but I don't know when you started making art and whether from the very beginning your art was so, let's say, impact charged. Because your work is sort of incredibly multi-layered. I mean, we saw, for example, Sam Spratt on screen earlier. His work is also multi-layered, but you're taking that to a different level. Was it always like that? I mean, when did you start making art?
I think thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much, Diane. I don't know where is she, but it was a pleasure also the opportunity to exhibit in the fourth floor. I don't know. I mean, I travel a lot because of my father profession, and then I find myself that I was trying to find my place in the world, and I am that kind of generation that is in the threshold in between the analog and digital, I think. And I was always trying to find the poetry in technology, because I think that there's an amazing layer of poetry in what we are doing today. And it's what they found in the caves when they were manipulating the fire. They found the poetry in the first technology that we were controlling. From that to today, I think that there was a big journey behind my back. I think I can say that in 2008, it was my very first exhibition. And then I did a master in art and communication after my degree in art history. And at that point, I began working with new technologies and new media, doing net art, interactives, and many other things. And I can say that maybe a milestone in my career was in 2013 when I created the Manifesto Untangible, funding a museum in a hard drive, the Hard Disk Museum, that has today more than 140 artists. And it has been also the very first museum that has been stored in a single molecule of DNA, because I was always kind of obsessed about the notion of heritage, about the notion of memory, about the notion of bringing value to the intangible. And digital is untangible sometimes. And in a society that everything is based in the matter, I think it's very pertinent to talk about those issues that I am addressing today. In 2019, I create another milestone in my career. I think it was the token Olea, that it was a smart contract that was also stored in DNA. And then we put the DNA inside olive oil, and I create an olive oil that was containing, is the bridge in between economies, the first one that is agriculture, and the new one that is based in blockchain technologies.
That's just crazy. Wait, let me stop you right there. So how do you put DNA in olive oil?
Basically,
I'm sure nobody knows the answer to this question.
Basically, I mean, everything is, I even had the tattoo, everything is a code and everything is based in love. So you have to love the idea of having something that is belonging to the digital world into the matter. And then for me, the bridge is the DNA. DNA is an encoding that it's everywhere. It's even in the outer space. So you can switch from a binary code into a quaternary code. So you can encode ones and zeros into amino acids, and then you can produce the molecule and you can play around with that. And for me, it could be kind of a switch to really connect what means the value in the internet and the value in the physical things, because we can label things with this technology. And it's something I was playing around many other projects.
It's crazy. So the code is a bridge, basically, between the physical and the digital world, in the sense that you translate the DNA into binary code, and you can do that both ways.
Exactly, I do believe on that, and I think that the Manifesto Territorial that I think is the project I am presenting here. It's talking about that possibility, because sometimes when we need to address a future generation with a message, we don't know how to do. We don't have the universal language, But I think that possibly the genetic information could be one of them.
Incredible. And we're going to talk about your installation on the fourth floor, of course. Kristina, I'm going to go to you. So you are managing director at the LASA Foundation, which is a foundation of the future. So tell us about your journey.
Exactly. Is this on? Yeah. So thank you so much for having me. Wonderful to be on this panel today with you. I've been working personally at the intersection of arts and technology for many years, and I'm with LS now for a little bit over 6 years. Helped build and grow this organization. So LS Art Foundation is a Berlin-based, privately funded nonprofit art foundation exploring the intersection of art, science, and technology. So we do not have a physical space, but we'll share the website later on. So please, if you have a chance to come to Berlin, not just Berlin, but check out our website and see when and where exhibitions or projects of ours will happen. Ella, everyone will agree that art is really powerful and can create impact. If it's, steering discussions or creating awareness or even making aware or translating very complex technologies or other problems of today's world. And so impact projects are part of our mission, and the artists we work with a lot of times have the same idea or cause, what they are trying to tell through their artworks, and we are able, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to give them a platform to share their visions with us. And we'll be speaking a little bit later on very concretely about one project.
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. And I just want to say that, Alvaro and I are based in Geneva, where we're really sort of seeing firsthand a funding crisis because, all the international organizations, their budgets are getting cut. And sort of the private sector is becoming more and more important. So the Geneva government, for example, is working closely with the private sector to sort of be able to fill the gaps that we're seeing right now. So private foundations, for example, artists, leaders in this space, I think are more and more important now than they were even a year ago, maybe before Trump came into power. So Alvaro, I'm going to switch to you. Tell us, so you work for, you're head of innovation at Switzerland for UNHCR, sort of a very, very large humanitarian organization. You have, 15,000 employees all over the world? The UNHCR.
No, indeed. Thank you, Leila. Thank you for having me here. So as Leila said, I come from Geneva. So I'm a typical Genevan boy, graduate institute, starting with human rights. And then actually I completely switched to become an advertising creative. And my job was pretty much connecting the dots with how do you reach audiences? How do you convey a message to those audiences? So when I moved back to the UN, to UNHCR, I joined what we call Switzerland for UNHCR, which is, think of it as a kind of a sandbox where we can explore new ways to raise funds and connect with new audiences. And so I use this experience in this. And what you're seeing right now is actually our first attempt, which didn't work, did not at all. It made a lot of noise because for us, it was more important to only raise funds, was also to convey a message. So we say, okay, great, let's do an NFT. It's the big hype, everyone's talking about it. So we say, but let's do it differently. So here, Hani Abbas is a Palestinian refugee in Syria, who was a cartoonist who had to flee his country because he was getting in trouble for making fun of people. And we asked him, hey, let's do an NFT. No idea if it's going to work. So he made a lot of noise traditionally, but didn't work at all in terms of sales. So then we continued to explore, and actually I think maybe you can, I don't have the clicker.
Click, yeah.
So we started really experimenting about how can we use this digital art, and we created a project like this where we were mapping locations, camps, location, operation locations. It was a proof of participation during conferences, and then we also, maybe if you can click as well. Here we go, that's one of my favorites as well. It's like we started doing generative AI on what would the world look like if we had no displacement. That's Syria to you. When you prompt no displacement, that's actually, so we work with an artist there. So we did many projects, experimenting, seeing how it can be a source not only of funding, but also, as I said, of raising awareness about people forced to flee around the world. And knowing that this week new numbers came out, and we reached a huge number of 123 million people forced to flee around the world. So new data
124 million.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, so if it was if it was a country, it would be the fastest growing country in the world. So yeah.
And then your latest that you wanted to show, maybe one
Exactly.
click away.
Right, so that's one of our favorite projects as well. It was a sale with Christie's. Actually, I know a lot of people here present in the room also participated as well. And for us, it's also a direction that we're really looking into. Is UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, is a big provider of data. So a lot of NGOs or other organizations use this data about displacement, crisis, countries, and we use the data of UNA. Actually, the artists use the data of the percentage of asylum requests accepted in the G7 countries, and each hand opens up if the percentage increases, and if it decreases, the hand closes, pretty much.
So it's an artwork that evolves over time
Exactly,
based
yeah.
on sort of live data from the UNHCR data team. It's just incredible. Yeah. Okay, Kristina, back to you. Let's talk about a concrete project of the future. I think you wanted to talk about the pollinator, which is amazing. And I think it's, like I said, it's when we go to the main fair now, the focus is on the garden in the middle, which for the first time is an edible garden. So I thought this was sort of a nice thing to watch right now.
Exactly. It's not our latest project, but it's still ongoing. We launched 2 years ago, and it'll be for at least another year in Berlin. And I think it fits perfectly to this panel. So maybe skip to the next slide, please. Exactly. So it's a project by British artist Aleksandra Ginsberg, and it's a public artwork, or even like a living garden sculpture, you could call it. So it's commissioned. The Berlin edition was commissioned by LS, and we implemented it. So basically, really physically growing a garden together in collaboration with the Museum of Natural History in Berlin. It's based in their courtyard, and it consistently grows within the city. Together with local communities as well as individuals. So what this means, I will explain in a little bit. So basically, the artist's intention is to shift, to create a shift of perspective. So away from human taste to pollinators' taste, or in order to create pollinators' diversity. So the garden is set up in a way. Obviously, I think it's beautiful, and the plants are beautiful. It's like very, especially now in summer when it rains, it's so blooming and full. But it's not made for our eyes. It's not made for our taste. It's made for the pollinators, and it speaks to, I would say, beetles and bees and any kind of insect that falls under pollinators. And there's large and smaller plants, so everyone gets something to nibble on, basically. So the artist developed an algorithm together with scientists, and this algorithm then assembles and arranges plants to create a garden that basically becomes then an ideal living environment for pollinators. So it's quite technical in a way. So it's located in Berlin. It's for free. I think nearly 2 million people already have seen it, and basically everyone who wants to go to the Museum of Natural History will walk through it. So when you have a chance to visit Berlin, please stop by, especially this summer. It's going to be really beautiful. And it's an analog artwork, but there's also a DIY campaign attached, and it's a community project. So what this means, maybe if you can go to the next slide. Sorry, I don't have the slides in my head. Exactly, this shows how it was basically, in our team also helped to dig and create the garden here. When you go further, so basically it's also a platform to create additional community events. This was a food artist in residency that we attached to this garden project. So there was a summer program last year. When you can go to the next slide. Exactly, so this is a community. So behind all of this is an algorithm, and there is the platform pollinator.art. Everyone can access it. So all of us, we have a balcony at home, hopefully, or a small garden even. We can enter the specifics of this garden, of this balcony, if it's sunny, if it's shady, what's the consistency of the soil, and so on and so on. And then this algorithm helps to create you a plant list and gives you a pattern so that you can plant and create a garden yourself. Same, definitely. I mean, it applies to everyone and also to communities. So we support it, or we do still support various schools and kindergartens and neighborhood communities with creating gardens. Even fund this. We provide a little funding support here, and our team really helps to do that. So there today, in addition to the large garden addition, about 15 additional gardens all over Berlin. Even more when you count in all the individual gardens, and that's actually really, you can see pollinator.art, and that's actually really important for the impact of this project, because the insects like to travel, you know, and they have flight routes, and they like to travel and to spread. So this is, and there's, if you want to have another minute?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I do want to share some of the impact. I have some numbers here. This whole project is being accompanied by the Museum of Natural History, so by their scientists. Someone is regularly looking and observing this project. So there was recently a report, and there are over 63 wild bees found into the garden edition. There are 2, so to say, highly remarkable bee species, so the first ever seen in Berlin. So there's over 7,000 plants of 80 varieties in this little plot you've seen before. And yeah, so it is a real impact.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you're changing the landscape of Berlin in a sense. And let me ask you, other than the museum, are other institutions getting involved in Berlin?
In Berlin, obviously, together with the Museum of Natural History, there's a close collaboration, and it has to be, because it's basically in their courtyard. But the garden it originated in the UK. The artist is UK based, and this is where the first garden was in Cornwall was planted. There's Berlin. I believe there will be other I would say institutions or opportunities. You know, it can be copied
and spread.
And that's the idea.
Alex, how do you see this? Do you see corporate collectors being inspired by this, and when they're building their collections, thinking more and more about sort of the impact and the identity that they want their collections to have?
I hope so. I think just speaking to quite a few people, it's often really highly depends on the mission statement and the curator. At the end of the day, a lot of people, they don't really have, unless they have a family affiliation with some crisis, they don't have the full picture or the scope of the reality of the situation. And it's much easier to be affiliated through institutional context rather than sort of like directly supporting teams that are on the ground. But I do think generally there's definitely massive allocations for these initiatives. So I think that the more we sort of build meaningful ways that make an impact, the better.
Alvaro, then I'm going to go back to you, because talk about making impact. It's sort of an emergency where you're concerned, right? Yes, I wanted to ask you about sort of the different perspectives that people bring, or artists bring, when they're looking at the refugee crisis.
No, indeed, Leila. The interesting thing about working with different people, with artists mainly, is to really have their perspective. Sometimes when you work in our field, you're always like day in, day out, looking at the same thing, data, numbers, and it's great to actually get out of there and see the perspective of someone who sees it from a different angle and bring new perspective and new elements that you didn't think about it. And for us, obviously, climate change is a huge issue for refugees in 2 ways, actually. The first one being that the vast majority of refugees remain in the countries nearby, so they're not, going all to Europe or North America. And their countries are affected by climate change, so they already have to flee, and they arrive in a place where actually climate change is highly affecting these new places. And the second way is obviously climate change creates displacement as well, not because of the typical idea we have this island that's disappearing and people need to flee, but also because as climate change evolves, conflict arrive, because of resources, lack of resources, water, and other consequences. And the great example here with Nice Auntie was part of the sale or the fundraising, the auction we did with Christie's, and it was a great illustration on how displacement is affected by climate change. And so we really were excited to see this new perspective, new way of interpreting this, and less about factual data and numbers and things that we see every day, but more like an illustration that reaches people easily, I mean, in an easier way.
And many of the artists who participated brought in sort of their personal stories, right? Sasha, I don't know whether she's still here, but she also participated with a sort of the generational perspective and a poem that she had written to her mother, which was, very impactful. But Alex, I'm going to go back to you because I want to end with Solimán and your work, because it's going to be difficult to move on from that. But so Alex, I want to sort of touch on the past projects that you did, especially the one on Open Sea. So tell us a little bit about sort of that trajectory.
I unfortunately don't have slides. I didn't know we had to put slides. If you Google relief, the second E is a 3. We did a project, and maybe I'll mention 2 projects because I think both of them share the relevance of like community-driven. So in 2022, many of you know, the war broke out sort of like when Russia invaded Ukraine, and I'm from Ukraine, my family is there. And so I woke up one morning and I'm like, oh shit. And I did what I think anyone would have done in my position, where you have an audience and you know that the power of Web3 is the community. And I started reaching out to people who had an influence, who want to do something connected to art and fundraising. And so together with Andrew Wang and Sadvik and a group of people, we basically in a few days spinned up something that many people who work with NFTs or have been involved in NFTs back in the day know. It's called like a randomized mint, where different artists contribute an artwork, and then when you're buying, you don't know what you're gonna get. And the reason we did it is because we didn't want the fame, we didn't want any fancy names, we wanted money. We wanted money that we can send, it was 100% donated. But we did sort of like invite some of the biggest artists at the time. I think Alien Queen was a part of it. And it was 60 artists in 2 days. 60 artists created an artwork that they donated, and we released it 2 days after the war broke out, and in 30 seconds it raised $1.5 million.
That's incredible.
Which none of us expected, and I think to date it's the biggest NFT fundraiser ever. And yeah, it was named like Open Sea Collection for Goods. We had Time Magazine, Financial Times, people calling us like, talk about your project. And I think from that moment, the world really saw how fast NFTs and crypto can have an impact. And I think one of the biggest challenges often I faced, and we talked about this a little bit, is when you want to make a donation, often there are certain bureaucratic hoops you have to jump, and the fact that you can sort of like transfer crypto so fast was a very big advantage to us, because we spent several months sort of identifying charities that are on the ground, and we were able to support. But I also, like, on that note, on community-driven impact, just want to mention, obviously, I oversee programming across the Tezos ecosystem, which is one of the strongest communities there is on the blockchain. And a few years back, there was an earthquake in Turkey, and overnight, a group of people, I think it was like a few dozen people, came together and launched Tezquake 8, where artists would also, thanks to the online communities, create a hashtag Tezquake 8 and basically launch their work for sale, and whatever was collected, the proceeds were directly sort of like redirected to a fund that would go towards the relief. And it was an incredible initiative with thousands of artists and works being donated. And I wasn't working at the Tezos ecosystem at the time. I was working at Join, so I helped create an infrastructure where you could easily browse all the works that are being supported. So just coming back to my point is, I think these, like, if you want to move fast, I think the fact that art on the blockchain is so permissionless and there's so little hoops you need to jump really allows a lot of people to make an impact. And just tying it back to, obviously, corporate collections, I think there's a lot of room to support initiatives by empowering them through various structures.
Yeah, and we saw Ryan speaking earlier about One of One and how he has sort of a mission-driven identity as well. And you're right, you pulled that together so quickly. Was it in 2022 with the earthquake in Turkey?
No, the earthquake in Turkey, I think it was a year later.
2023.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Solimán, I'm going to go to you now because you work very slowly, right? This is not, your projects are not fast put together projects. So tell us, we're going to speak about the installation on the 4th floor, but first I wanted to go back to another project that you did, Capside, and tell us what that took and how long it took, and from idea to execution.
So thank you for this question, because I think that previously to this conversation there was another project mentioned in the Amazon, and I was very shocked about how that project has been addressed.
Oh, Rafik, the Rafik
Yeah,
screen.
I'm talking about that project. I was working with a local community and a curator, Lina Castañeda, for 2 years in the south of Colombia, in Leticia, for involving them in the production of a new concept of critical tourism, and at the same time to create advocacy for the environmental DNA. And we did a big research in collaboration with the community. This is a t-shirt. I think you can play it. It should be movement, yeah. So we did a documentary, 27 minutes. If someone wants to watch it, I can privately share it. Basically, I was in conversation with the local chefs of the community, Los Abuelos, and they brought me, they invited me to work with 4 different trees, trees that are very meaningful for different reasons, from the medicine, for the history, because that region was very impacted in the Second World War because of the destruction of the rubber. They killed 22,000 indigenous people because the extraction of this natural resin. So what I did there is how we can visualize the invisible knowledge of nature, how we can visualize the invisible witness of biodiversity. We are creating advocacy very locally, but nature is in movement. We can talk about Bruno Latour, for example. Gaia is a whole ecosystem, hyper-connected. So the problem is that when we are localizing this treatment for a very specific place, we are leaving, something that is, without any care. So what we did is we extract different samples from the soil to the roots to the branches and in the air, because in the Amazon there's an enormous and incredible behavior that is the flying rivers. Flying rivers is considered the biggest river in the world because the trees extract any liquid that is in the roots in collaboration with the mycelium, and they transpire it. They do evapotranspiration.
Oh, wow.
So in that process, they are absorbing the genetic information of the rainforest. So literally, they are putting in this position the genetic information of the world in the air. And what I found in my research is that the 50% of the environmental DNA for who don't know what it is any traces of genetic information that we can find in an environment. So this is invisible for the eyes because it's DNA, it's natural DNA. That brings me the opportunity to say, doesn't mind, if we are protecting this space when everything is in movement, we have to protect the very base that is environmental DNA. So we isolated the samples. We found 6,096 species in those 4 trees, and I embed this DNA inside 16 spheres of rubber. This rubber that caused that.
And once again, the way you did that is you translated the DNA into code and you inserted.
No, in this case, it was raw
like the
real
actual
data,
cells.
raw DNA from species. And then we create like a path inside the rainforest that brings the community the opportunity of having their own museum. So now people can go to the rainforest, they are in conversation with them, and the performance is that the indigenous people became like a curator, because they're explaining, what's going on. I was shocking because they already knew that there was some kind of invisible information in the rainforest. So there was nothing new for them. That I was talking about environmental DNA. Maybe they call it in other words, but they knew that something invisible was there. We originally presented the project in COP16 in Cali, and now we have the documentary, and now I'm working in an immersive experience that is the Sacred Drop, that is trying to remove this notion of an immersive experience as a place where you have to be isolated from the rest of the world. I would like to use technology in this case to connect with nature. So people should stand like quiet for a whole minute, 1 minute.
1 minute.
Only
Wow.
1 minute,
It's
and
a
then
long
there's
time.
a system of water that is dropping a single drop of water that contains an augmentation of the environmental DNA from the rainforest. So basically, you are blessed by nature in the installation. For me, the most interesting thing and the impact behind this project is how art can create advocacy, because as we are protecting the environmental DNA through the creation of those sculptures, they are protected because the intellectual property of the artwork itself is creating the protection of the material itself, and the collector becomes a conservator of the biodiversity. So I think that the art at this point is performing in a very expanded notion.
Wow, that's incredible. I was just thinking that we didn't do this on purpose, but it's sort of a lot of nature here, during our panel today. The garden, the pollination, your project with the DNA, the garden and the main fair, the climate. It's sort of, we're all, it's all pointing in the same direction. But tell us quickly about the installation, because everybody has a chance now to go to the 4th floor and see what you've done there, which is quite incredible.
Yeah. I have a video also. I don't know if it's there or not. No, we just only have this one. Well, anyway, you can see everything on the booth. So it's another project that I began in 2022 in collaboration with the Institute for Technologists in Paris. I was trying to understand why we are so disconnected from the planet in a frequency level. The human resonance found that the planet emits a frequency of in between 7 and 11 hertz, and our brain, when we are like in a high level of consciousness, we are emitting the same range of frequency. But now with the using of wireless technology, the planet has increased a lot its frequency, so we are not in balance anymore. So we need to listen to the planet, and maybe it could be one of the causes that we are really literally, I'm sorry for the expression, fucking up the planet because we are not connected with the planet. So basically what I did is I created a manifesto. It's the Manifesto Terricola. In Latin, terra means earth, and cola means people who cultivate or people who do culture. So it was a very powerful name, and I created this manifesto that has different blocks of content, but in general it's talking about the relationship in between art, science, ecology, and how art can be the meeting point for that. And I am very aggressive with a comment. If you are not going in that direction, you are not a territorial artist. You are belonging to another planet. And this information, the manifesto, has been stored in 16 molecules of DNA. Each fragment of the text has been encoded as I did with the olive oil. And then the 16 molecules of DNA has been introduced in a solution of collagen for the 3D printing of a human-sized ear. And this human-sized ear, I brought it to a glacier in Svalbard in the north of Norway. That is a very special place because we have the seed bowl there to reboot the agriculture food ecosystem in the world. But at that point, there was nothing to reboot the mine ecosystem for humans. And we have two scenarios. If we continue melting the glaciers, the ear will rise to the top of the surface of the glacier, and if it is a collagen that is 100% biodegradable, the message will be gone in a couple of days. And if someone finds the ear, rather than to find human genomic information, it will find the manifesto. No?
That's just incredible. And do you interact with corporate collectors? I mean, do you have patrons, institutional patrons who fund these incredible projects?
I'm struggling a lot with that. I'm literally struggling a lot because I think that there's a disconnection in the notion of being a collector or being a supporter. And I think that today we need supporters. We don't need collectors. We need supporters. And we need to support ideas in advance. Because sometimes artists, we need to do things with the correct situation. I think that the collector is like, in the sofa waiting for the artist to have the final product. Hey guys, help me to produce the first step of the product. And then you will get more money because you are from the very beginning here with me.
Right, of course, yeah.
Me, and that's happening, for example, in cinema, Cinema.
Where are the patrons?
That's the question.
Well, the patrons are right here, Kristina, right? You guys are patrons.
Well, we do
collaborations, right?
We do collaborations, and we do work with patrons too.
I would say like the Tezos Foundation is definitely a patron of the arts, and then the Trilitech team is definitely also at the same time a supporter, because a lot of our work actually is just project management, overseeing how it comes to life, how it actually gets this, like people hear about it, they find out about it. Does the product work? And I'll be honest with you, it's a lot of work. Like we worked on UNHCR last year here, a fundraising sale on Object, and the amount of work behind the scenes that goes into this is incredible. So how do we optimize this? How do we actually make sure that the money spent, it's not on decorations, but it's on, furthering that message, raising more, being able to sort of like make an impact by actually making an impact. And I think that sort of like my operations mind is thinking like, how do we optimize to make the most impact?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to sit here again next year and see what we've done, right?
Oh, I can't wait.
Thank you guys very much. We're out of time, unfortunately. But thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Wow, that was really great. It's really amazing. Just real quick before you guys leave, we are going to break for lunch, but I just want to thank Leila, the whole panel. This was really great. As we see, when crisis hits or something comes, artists, creatives, they come together, and this is really important. And there's really impact that can come from art. And I think the power of art is really important. So thank you guys so much. We're gonna take a 30-minute break for lunch. There's some really lovely restaurants around. You can grab a bite. There's a couple aspects if you're hungry. There's also the Art Meta you can check out, but please come back. We have 2 more sessions this afternoon you don't wanna miss. Sasha Stiles, Mikel are gonna talk about some of the things they're doing with artists and brands and fashion, as well as we have an amazing session with the paint box as well. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Leila. Thank you all. I appreciate it.